Hello everyone, got a few dirty jokes for you today. So a general visits an army hospital to check on the conditions and inspire the troops. It's World War I, trench warfare is living hell, and the men could really use some inspiration. The general starts talking to the wounded soldiers. He goes up to the first man and says, "What brings you in here, son?" The soldier replies, "Sir, I got dysentery in the trenches, something awful." The general asks him, "How are they caring for you in here?" And the soldier replies, "Well, sir, every day the nurses put a cool cloth on my head and they clean my behind with a soft brush." The general asks, "Is there anything else we can do for you?" And the soldier says, "No, sir, the nurses are doing the best they can." The general seems satisfied, thanks him for his service, and moves on to the next man. The general approaches the second man's bed and asks, "What brings you in here, son?" The soldier replies, somewhat embarrassed, "Sir, I got gonorrhea from a woman while I was on leave." The general laughs and says, "It happens to the best of us, son. How are they caring for you in here?" And the soldier replies, "Well, sir, every day the nurses put a cool cloth on my head and they clean my privates with a soft brush." The general asks, "Is there anything else we can do for you?" And the soldier says, "No, sir, the nurses are doing the best they can." The general once again seems satisfied, thanks him for his service, and moves on to the next man. The general approaches the third man's bed and asks, "What brings you in here, son?" The soldier tells him, "Sir, I got strep throat in the trenches." The general asks, "How are they caring for you in here?" And the soldier replies, "Well, sir, every day the nurses put a cool cloth on my head and they clean my throat with a soft brush." The general asks, "Is there anything else we can do for you?" "Actually, sir, there is one thing," said the soldier. "I'd like to be the first one to use the brush." So there was once a very successful farmer from Texas who started gaining interest in his ancestry. After doing some digging, he traced his lineage back to a small town in Ireland. And lo and behold, they were a family of farmers. So he packed his bags and took a trip to Ireland to visit the small town to see if he could track down some of his kin. After landing in Dublin and driving an hour outside of the city, he stopped in a pub to grab a drink and start asking around about his family. The Texan sat down, ordered a pint, and started talking to the Irishman sitting at the bar. After explaining his story and the purpose of the trip, the Irishman responded, "You don't say. I've never heard of your family, but I'm a farmer as well. Tell me, what's it like farming in Texas?" Gladly, the Texan said, "Farming in Texas has been quite lucrative for me. If you started out in the morning and drove west, you could drive all day before you reached the end of my property. And if you started the next day and drove east all day, you wouldn't reach the end of my property. Same thing north and south, you could drive either direction all day and you wouldn't reach the end of my farmland." I know what you mean," said the Irishman. "I've got a tractor like that as well." So a spiritual leader lay quietly in his deathbed. The disciples had gathered around his bed and recited some holy verses, trying to make his last journey divine and pleasant. They wanted to give him warm milk to drink, but he declined. One of the disciples took the glass back to the kitchen and decided to add some brandy, considering it good for health. He poured a generous amount into the warm milk. Back at spiritual leader's bed, they lifted his head gently and held the glass to his lips. The very frail man drank a little, then a little more, and before they knew it, he had finished the whole glass down to the last drop. As his eyes brightened, the disciples thought it would be a good opportunity to have one last talk with their spiritual leader. "Sir," the disciples asked earnestly, "please give us some of your wisdom before you leave us." He raised himself up very slowly in the bed on one elbow, looked at them and said, "Don't sell that cow." A contractor dies in a car accident on his 40th birthday and finds himself at the pearly gates. A brass band is playing. The angels are singing a beautiful hymn. There is a huge crowd cheering and shouting his name, and absolutely everyone wants to shake his hand. Just when he thinks things can't possibly get any better, St. Peter himself runs over, apologizes for not greeting him personally at the pearly gates, shakes his hand, and says, "Congratulations, son, we've been waiting a long time for you." Totally confused and a little embarrassed, the contractor sheepishly looks at St. Peter and says, "St. Peter, I tried to lead a God-fearing life. I loved my family. I tried to obey the 10 Commandments, but congratulations for what? I honestly don't remember doing anything really special when I was alive." "Congratulations for what?" says St. Peter, totally amazed at the man's modesty. "We're celebrating the fact that you lived to be 160 years old. God himself wants to see you." The contractor is awestruck and can only look at St. Peter with his mouth wide open. When he regains his power of speech, he looks up at St. Peter and says, "St. Peter, I lived my life in the eternal hope that when I died I would be judged by God and be found to be worthy, but I'd only lived to be 40. "That's simply impossible, son," says St. Peter. "We've added up your time sheets." So after many years of hard work, Joe rewarded himself with a long, luxurious stay at an exclusive Caribbean resort. While relaxing on the beach, he was surprised to see a former high school classmate who he hadn't seen since they graduated. His old friend had been something of a burnout in high school, and this was the last place Joe expected to see him. Joe approached the man and seized his hand. "Pete, it's Joe. From high school. It's sure been a long time. You look great. You must really be doing okay for yourself." "I am," whispered Pete. "I'm a partner with a very successful law firm. But don't tell Mother. She got the idea that I was a drug dealer back when I was in high school, and she would be terribly disappointed if she figured out how I really make my money." So 3 swimmers are on the starting blocks at the Paralympic Games. The first one has no arms, the second one has no legs, and the third one is just a head standing on the block. The race starts. The first 2 swimmers jump in and start swimming. Someone pushes the head in. They go at it like crazy, and finally, the guy with no legs reaches the finish line. Everyone cheers. He is so happy, but he looks around and sees bubbles coming from the water. He dives and grabs the head that was underwater. The head coughs some water and says, "I trained for 5 years to swim with my ears, and just before the start an idiot comes and puts a swim cap on me."